Hey, what's up guys? My name's Fonz. Today I want to talk a little bit about my boy Tartaglia. This character is getting his second rerun coming in 2.2, and I figured this was a good time to actually talk a little bit about him, give you some tips and tricks on like how to build him and how to use him, and just kind of gush over the character because I love this character so much. So let's get right into it. So Tartaglia, or Child, or Tartaglia, whatever you want to call him, is a super versatile character that can be used in a lot of different ways. As you can see, I'm friendship 10 with this character. He's one of my absolute favorite characters and is literally the reason that I started spending money on this game. So thank you for that. So let's start off talking about his talents a little bit. Like I was saying, Tartaglia is a pretty interesting character, in meaning that he is a bow character. So he does use a bow. He actually does like a stance change and brings out two like hydro swords and turns into a melee character. It's so sick, bro. So keep in mind, throughout this video, I will be talking about him in his range stance and his melee stance. So activating this ability does summon those two like hydro swords, and all of his damage is now hydro damage. In this stance, his normal attack is 6 like consecutive hydro strikes. You do want to weave in some charge attacks when you can because his charge attack actually is really good. But the most important part about this whole stance is his Riptide Slash. Now essentially, Riptide will be applied to enemies when you either charge shot with your regular range stance or when you land a crit with your melee stance. Now, if an enemy already has Riptide on them and you attack with his melee stance, you will actually do AoE hydro damage, which is one of the big reasons that Tartaglia is so good for just groups of enemies. Now, one of the downsides about this ability is that you can leave it up for too long, because you can see his max cooldown is 45 seconds, which sounds like a lot, and it is. But trust me, when you're actually fighting, if you use his full duration of his E, dude, it's an eternity. I guarantee you'll switch back to Child like 4 times and be like, dude, it's still not ready. But there are ways around that, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit here in just a minute when we're talking about his artifacts. Now, I do have Foul Legacy Raging Tide crowned. This is the only ability that I have crowned in the entire game, just because I love the skill so much. You can see the scalings on it once it's fully crowned, and definitely the most important thing to prioritize when you're using Child. The next thing to prioritize is going to be his Havoc Obliteration, his Elemental Burst. Now again, this has 2 different ways of activating it. You can do it in his range stance or his melee stance. Now the range stance is a super quick animation, does a decent amount of damage, and applies Riptide to whatever enemy it hits, which can come in handy. Or you can use it in his melee stance where his 2 swords turn into one giant Hydro Spear and just does a massive amount of damage. And if you hit any enemies that are affected by Riptide already, it'll actually trigger Riptide Blast, which Riptide Blast will actually clear the Riptide off of them, but causes AoE Hydro damage that's considered Elemental Burst damage. Now I've got his burst at level 8, and you can see that the scalings on this are still pretty high. Also, I should mention that his energy cost for his burst is 60 for either stance, but if you use the ranged version of this burst, you'll actually get 20 energy back for free. Now the last thing to talk about leveling up is his normal attacks, which isn't super important. You can see that leveling it up does affect some like Riptide damage and stuff like that, but me personally, I would recommend getting it to level 6 or level 7 in Child's case. Somewhere around there, I'm happy with it. It's not crazy. A charge attack on Child vapes for like 20k, but his normal attacks really aren't that important. Now on to his passive talents. His first one, Never Ending, extends Riptide's duration by 8 seconds. So his second passive talent, Sword of Torrents, whenever you're in his melee stance and you land a crit with a normal or charged attack, it will also apply Riptide to the opponents. In his last passive talent, the only character that does this, and I think is one of the best talents in the game, he literally increases your whole party member's normal attack level by 1. It doesn't sound like much, but if you're running like a Ganyu with a crowned normal attack, it's the only way to get your attack from level 10 to level 11 in the game. Now on to his constellations, I have him at C0 because by this time I wasn't really spending money on the game, but some of his constellations are pretty good, so I feel like we should talk about them a little bit. So his C1 decreases the melee stance cooldown by 20%, so you'll be able to get back into his melee stance quicker. It's not like a deal breaker. I don't think you need this, but I mean, it is useful. His C2 is basically just like energy generation. I would say his biggest constellation is a C3. This is going to be like the biggest bump in damage, where it literally just bumps up the level of his elemental skill by 3. C4 is kind of a controversial one for some people. I don't really know why, but basically if an enemy has Riptide on them, every 4 seconds, it triggers a Riptide Flash, which literally just does AoE hydro damage for free. Like I get that it can mess up the timing on some like vaporizes and stuff like that, but in general, it's really good. It's just more damage. C5, of course, increases his Havoc Obliteration, his Elemental Burst, and then finally his C6, Havoc Annihilation. When Havoc Obliteration is cast in melee stance, the cooldown of Foul Legacy Raging Tide, his melee stance, is reset. So with his C6, you can literally stay in his melee stance forever. This is actually a super good C6. But because Child is such a fast Hydro applicator, that means that you are going to need to be running a supporting cast of characters that can actually make sure that you can vaporize and to just provide more damage. So in general, even if you have this, you're going to want to have a little bit of downtime for Child, because at some point you're going to have to stop and actually build up your team's bursts again. Overall, his constellations are pretty good. I've been using him at C0. I've got him at Friendship 10 with a crowned E. I love this character. Trust me when I say his constellations are great. If you happen to get one or two, great. You do not need constellations for this character to be fun or viable. Trust me. Now let's talk about Child's weapons before we get into artifacts real quick. I'm going to go through most of the weapons that I see people use on Child and talk about the good, the bad, and the useless. Starting off with the useless. Sacrificial bow doesn't work. This is a bow that can reset your skill cooldown. Sounds amazing, but just straight up doesn't work for Child. Now, like I was saying before, you do have several weapons that are going to be really, really good on Child. If you don't have anything else and you have the Windbloom Ode, this weapon is fine on Child. I want to emphasize fine. It's not breaking any records, but its effect actually has decent synergy with Child. The only thing it sucks is that it's elemental mastery, but overall, if this is all you have, he'll still do fine. Now, some of Child's best 4-star weapons. First up, Viridescent Hunt, the Battle Pass bow. Amazing. Gives you 27.6% crit rate, and his normal attacks will have a 50% chance to generate a cyclone on the ground that will pull enemies together and do a little damage over time, and this can be triggered in his melee stance. If you remember earlier with the Riptide Slash thing, Child does really well with enemies grouped close together. So honestly, this is one of the best weapons for him. Now, another one that's going to be really good is going to be Rust. This will increase his normal attack damage by 80% when fully max refined. This is what I was using on him for the most part before I actually got Skyward Harp. I was using this on him when this was like refinement rank 1. Keep in mind that this weapon is a little bit harder to build around because it is an attack stat weapon, and it does decrease your charge attack damage by 10%, but overall, this weapon is amazing for Child. Stringless can also be really good if you want to go for like really big one-shots on bosses, but in general, I don't use it very much. And when it says it increases your elemental skill and elemental burst damage, it only increases your elemental skill damage on the stance change. It doesn't do 48% more damage for every single slice. That would be busted. On to some of the 5 stars that we have for him. I have Skyward Harp, and that's what I run him on. Skyward Harp is absolutely one of the best weapons in the game, in my opinion. It gives you crit rate, crit damage, and AoE physical damage. All of this jammed into one weapon makes this crazy. Another really good one is going to be the Thundering Pulse, because that weapon focuses a lot on normal attacking. And then obviously we do have the Polar Star coming out soon, which there's a lot of talk since it'll be coming out probably alongside Child. That's going to be his new signature weapon. So if that weapon's anything like Thundering Pulse or the Skyward Harp, it's going to be crazy. Okay, so literally as I'm recording this video, and I'm talking about how I don't know what the Polar Star does, MiHoYo dropped some information about the Polar Star. So let's talk about this weapon a little bit since it will be coming out most likely alongside Child, and see if it'll be worth pulling for or not. I thought I was done with this video. So the weapon has a crit rate stat of 33.1%, which is dope. It does have a lower base attack than Skyward Harp. Skyward Harp has a base attack of 674, this weapon being 608, same as Thundering Pulse, but its effect. Elemental skill and elemental burst damage increased by 12%. After a normal attack, charged attack, elemental skill, or elemental burst hits an opponent, 1 stack of Ashen Nightstar will be gained for 12 seconds. When 1, 2, 3, or 4 stacks of Ashen Nightstar are present, attack will be increased by 10, 20, 30, and 48%. So remember earlier in the video that I recorded last night when I was literally talking about how, oh yeah, Stringless isn't going to buff your whole elemental skill duration by 48%. That would be broken. Well, I guess welcome Polar Star. The stack of Ashen Nightstar created by the normal attack, charge attack, elemental skill, or elemental burst will be counted independently to others. That is nuts. But I think what I'm most hyped for out of this whole thing is the fact that they literally told us what items we need to grind for to level these weapons up. This is huge. We've been begging for this. Overall, I think this weapon will be really good on Child. It'll be good on some other characters, I'm sure, like Yoimiya. I can see it being decent on Ganyu. I'm trying to think of who else it would be decent on. There's probably some characters that I'm missing, but keep in mind, if you do have something like Skyward Harp or Thundering Pulse, this is probably going to be like a marginal difference. I don't know that it's going to be worth it to pull for this weapon specifically. And if you're free to play, just don't even bother. Just stick with Rust on Child. It's fine. But for players that are comfortable dumping a little bit of money, this weapon does seem really good, and it'll be a nice addition to the arsenal. And they pretty much confirmed the other new weapon that's going to be on the first banner, the Akuamaru, which, like, bro, looks beautiful. It's an attack percent weapon at 41.3% with a base attack of 510, so not bad. And its effect is kind of interesting. For every point of the entire party's combined maximum energy capacity, the elemental burst damage of the character equipping this weapon is increased by 0.12%. A maximum of 40% increased elemental burst damage can be achieved this way. So it looks really cool. I think it's going to be good at like a higher refinement. I think at refinement rank 1, if I had to choose between this or the luxurious Sea Lord, I would just use the Sea Lord at refinement rank 5. But I think this weapon at higher refinements is going to beat it out just a little bit. But yeah, between these two weapons, I'll probably be pulling on the weapon banner. So get ready to watch my misery for that. Can't wait. Okay, I'm done rambling. Back to the video. Next up is artifacts. This won't take long. Run them on 4-piece Heart of Depth. That's literally all you got to know. If you're running him as a main DPS, make sure you're running him on attack sands, hydro damage bonus cup, and a crit rate or crit damage circlet. Overall, my Tartaglia is at 18,306 HP, 2114 attack, and 96 elemental mastery. This dude's a beast. He's one of the first characters that I farm for, so his stats aren't amazing. He could use a little bit more crit rate, but right now he's at 53,188 with 123 energy recharge. But if we steal Venti's hat, his stats look a lot better. And like I was telling you earlier, there is a way around using his entire skill, because with this set, you get to a point with diminishing returns. As you can see, when you use his elemental skill, his normal and charge attacks are buffed by 30% for 15 seconds. So I'll show you what it looks like here with and without the buff. So when you're using the Heart of Depth set and you activate his elemental skill, you'll see little arrows around him showing that you are being buffed right now by the set. Those arrows go away after 15 seconds. So when those arrows disappear, you switch off of Tartaglia. You can switch off or switch back to his ranged stance, but switching off of Tartaglia will just take him out of melee stance automatically. The cooldown of his melee stance is based on how long you stay in it. So you can stay in it up to 30 seconds, but it'll be a 45-second cooldown. You're better off using it for like 15 seconds and then having like a 20-second cooldown, because that gives you enough time to go through all of your other characters' abilities, switch back to Tartaglia, and your skill will be back up. Everyone acts like you need either C1 or C6 for this character to be viable. Look, you need like the slightest bit of brain power to make this character work. Trust me, if I can do it, you can do it. Now let's talk about team comps for Tartaglia. There's two main team comps that I like running him with. The first one being this team right here, running him with Bennett, Kazuha, and Zhangling. Now in this team, you are going to be doing a lot of damage with Tartaglia, but Zhangling will also be doing a ton of damage. We have Bennett to buff everybody's attack and heal them up, and then Kazuha to swirl whichever element we decide to swirl. Most of the time swirling Pyro because it does take priority over Hydro and it's a little bit easier to swirl. Now in this team, Child's acting as more of like a Hydro applicator so that Kazuha and Zhangling can vaporize on almost every single hit. Don't get me wrong, Tartaglia does huge damage, but overall Tartaglia and Zhangling are going to be like neck and neck for how much damage they're putting out. This is actually the team that helped me clear floor 12 recently. I don't know if you guys follow me on Twitter, which you should be, at the Fonz Plays, but I was having such a hard time with floor 12 this time around. I leveled up Zhangling, and this team is what actually got me through, and I really love this team. Now another great team for Tartaglia is an Electrocharge comp or a Fireworks combo with Bennett, Fischl, and Beto. Again, Bennett's there to buff everybody, keep everybody healed, where Fischl and Beto are acting as sub DPS and just constant electro applicators. Now one character that I did forget to mention that has amazing synergy with Tartaglia is Raiden Shogun. Raiden Shogun does a great job of filling in the gap when he has downtime on his E and providing a lot of sub DPS, constant electro application with her E ability, and helps restore everybody's ults. So with how fast Tartaglia actually applies Hydro, everything will always be electro charged and it's sick. I love it so much. This team is a blast. Now I will swap out Bennett from time to time with Xingqiu, because this way, even when Tartaglia's skill is down, you still have Xingqiu's rain swords. And honestly, he just has so much damage, he fits in everywhere. But let's do a little showcase showing off Tartaglia with this team, as well as the Vape Nation team. We'll also show off some like fun one-shots on bosses and stuff. I'm excited. We get to make another showcase. Hope you guys enjoy.
One with wind and cloud. Brace yourself. This is gonna hurt. guard go.
But yeah, there we go. That's Tartaglia explained. I'm sorry if some of these parts in this videos were a little bit long-winded, but this character's got so much going on. He's so much fun to play, and I really recommend, if you're looking for a good Hydro DPS, this is it. But I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, drop a like down below. Let me know, are you excited for Child's rerun? I feel like nobody is. But if you haven't got him and you need a good Hydro DPS, trust me, he will not fail you. Anyway, subscribe if you guys are new around here. And before we head out, a huge shout out to the members of the channel. Thank you so much for helping make these videos possible. I am going to start trying to stream every Wednesday night. So if you want to try to catch me on my streams, I will be live somewhere between like 9 or 10 o'clock Eastern time. Just make sure you hit the bell down below so you can stay updated on all the videos coming out and be notified whenever I go live. But with all that being said, I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you on the next one. Peace. Like, bro, I'm just saying, I would have his babies.